You are listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
Welcome to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. My unusually well-informed guest today is Mel Savage. Mel is a veteran in the world of advertising and marketing, including over 10 years as a senior executive at McDonald's in both Canada and the UK. Mel is also an ACTP certified career and leadership coach, a keynote and TEDx speaker, and host of the Career Reset podcast, which I enjoy. Today, Mel and I are going to talk about creating a career with meaning and purpose. Mel, welcome to the show.
So great to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So my first question, Mel, is what inspired you to help people reset their careers?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question because it's evolved. We were just talking before we started this about, the evolution of where I've taken my business from where it started to where it is now. And it all started for me when I was at McDonald's and I was, just disillusioned about my career. I've been very successful, but I wasn't happy anymore and I didn't love it. I had the difficult boss and things I didn't want to do anymore and, bored, et cetera, et cetera. And I decided I needed to pivot completely out of what I was doing. And at the time, when I decided to do the career reset, it was more about helping people decide what it is they wanted to do and have a plan to get there, whatever it was. But now that I've been a coach for 4 years, and done a lot of education and a lot of learning through the process, I have completely done a 180 on that, right? I have gone from trying to help people figure out what they wanted to do and help them get there to helping people really love what it is that they're doing right now. Because so often we kind of get, like I was, bored and disillusioned, and we blame everybody else, right? Oh, my job is boring. My boss is whatever our boss is, right? The company politics, the people I work with. Now it's like COVID and all this stuff, and we blame everybody and everything for our circumstance. And if we don't solve that where we are right now, we're going to bring all of that behavior and blaming behavior and sort of that reflex to the next thing. And what I've realized is you can love whatever it is that you're doing when you take accountability for how you show up, right? So don't spend all your energy starting over. Actually, you can spend probably like 20% of that energy and put it towards learning how to appreciate what you're doing right now.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I do see threads of that in your podcast, that transition from one to the other. And it reminds me of this idea that you could, somebody can find themselves in a string of bad relationships.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. If you don't change yourself and what you'll accept and what you project.
Yes.
So what are the types of things you work on with people to change how they reset their relationship with their current job?
Well, the first thing, I think there's two main areas for it. And that's really, so I just want to finish answering your other question, was where career reset before was about, okay, reset what you want to do. Now it's about resetting your approach and your thinking towards how you show up, right? And so the two things that I really focus on are, I call them like stabilize and grow. So this is sort of my own internal strategy, right? But the very first thing is, I like to work with people who are really smart, high potential people who have, lost their way, if you want to call it that, right?
Right.
So the first thing, to get back to the performance that makes you happy, because the worst thing that can happen to a high potential, high performing person is that they're not performing at their best anymore, right? So, and that comes from not loving what you're doing. So stabilize really means, okay, let's just get you back to a place where you appreciate where you're working. And I call it loving your job. So loving what you do and learning what that looks like for you in your job. And then from there, once we've stabilized the situation, then you can make an informed decision on what's next. And usually in that process of stabilization, you start performing better, you have different perspective, you're building better relationships, you're enjoying what you're doing more. And then you can say, okay, where are the performance areas? When I talk about growth, where are the performance areas where I really just need to focus to be able to achieve whatever career goal I have? Like let's set a goal and now let's go about achieving it. So it's really sort of first stabilize, then grow.
So although you've come from the point of view that somebody really has to change their job, if they're miserable with their job,
Yeah.
you're still allowing for the possibility that there must be some circumstances where you say to somebody, okay, the job you have is not going to give you what you want. How do you make that assessment?
Well, I don't assess. First of all, I let them assess it, but it's easier to assess it from a place of peace. Like I always say to people, any decision you make is the right one as long as you like your reasons for making it. So if your reason is like my reason was when I left McDonald's, which was, avoidance, frustration, fear of dealing with it, blame, basically, running away. There were some good rational reasons, right? My boss wasn't a great leader, wasn't the epitome of what a great leader should be, but I amplified that problem for myself, right? I made it worse than it needed to be. So I could point to a few things. There was some toxic problems, let's call it, in the culture, but I made that worse than it needed to be. I amplified that. So for even in any relationship, whether it's your relationship with your career, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship, I don't know, with a colleague or something like that, or a boss even, before you make a change, it's really great to stabilize yourself and make sure that when you make a decision, you're making it from a place of empowerment. You're moving towards something versus running away from something. If in that case you realize, okay, you know what? I know I'm fine now. I could handle this if I wanted to. Now my thing is, does this align enough? Do I want to keep doing all of this mental mindset management on myself to stay here? Does this align enough with what I want? A lot of the time people leave, they don't even know what they want next.
Right.
It's like, I need to find another job, even if it's in their industry and category, but they're like, I don't really know what I want from that job. I just don't want it to be this anymore. Right.
And that's probably not a great place to start, is it?
No. Right. Because that's always a red flag to me, saying, oh, they're running away from this. I can't assume that. You have to dig, but it's a bit of a flag to say, okay, they just want to get away from what this is. So stabilize what this is, and then decide what it is you are looking for. And then decide how many boxes where you are ticks, like how many boxes your current position ticks. And then, is it better to move somewhere else? Then you can make a rational decision from empowerment and abundance and moving forward versus running away. Right.
Right. So I actually have a question about how change is hard. And I was thinking along the lines of changing your job, but even changing yourself and your way of acting. I mean, people are going to be, what's up with you today? You seem really chipper. What's going on with you? Or why are you so keen to take on extra responsibilities or whatever? How do you address people's fear of change, that they get sort of stuck in a pattern or a mold?
Change. Are you meaning change? Like if I start doing the work on myself, let's say, like on how I show up versus worrying about how my boss behaves and what they do. And, there's a whole piece around there too, in terms of emotional management that we could cover. But are you saying the change is more people reacting to me showing up differently?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Let's start with that.
You know what? We're not accountable for how other people react. That's sort of my bottom line, right? If someone else is having a negative or positive reaction to the changes that I'm making in myself, I can't be responsible for that. Right? Now, as someone who, you want to be professional, you want to be your best self, you want to do ideally when you're working in a working environment, you don't want to do anything to hurt other people. You want to do it for the betterment of everyone, including yourself. But at the end of the day, you can't really, like, if you're being your best self and showing up and, being professional, how people react to your changes, it's on them.
Up to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how can someone reset their relationship with their coworkers and their
Yeah.
boss in a way that frees up more opportunity for them, or that allows you to tick more boxes at work?
Yeah, it's a good question, because one of the things that I think I certainly was in this mindset, let's call it, was that we come from this belief system that other people and circumstances outside of us are responsible for how we feel, right? So my boss says something and I get hurt. I always say it's like, oh, it's my boss's fault. My boss hurt my feelings. My boss made me mad. This person annoyed me, or whatever it is, like whatever emotion's coming up, or my husband made me happy, right? It works both ways, right?
Sure.
What's happening, and we just don't notice it, is somebody says something or does something, or something happens in the world, like it snows or there's a global pandemic or something like that. And then we just have some thoughts about that. And those thoughts create our feelings, like how we show up, ultimately, how we feel about things, how we act about things. So when it comes to, and that's, a very simplistic way, it's based on positive psychology, cognitive behavior. It's sort of a standard model of how human beings actually behave. But in a society, we're sort of taught that other people make us happy, like marry someone you love, find a job that makes you happy. Like we're taught these things, right?
Right.
And we talk that way. This made me feel this, right? So it's, first of all, just recognizing that the things that we control are our thinking. We don't control anybody else. I can't control you, Tim. I can't control your next question. I can't control whether you like the answers to these questions. All I can do is show up with energy, do my best, control my thoughts about myself, my thoughts about you, all that kind of thing, right?
Right.
So that is the first thing that I help people understand. And we practice specific situations that are happening to them. And we diagnose a little bit. Okay, so this happened. Your boss saying your work wasn't good enough, however they say that,
Sure,
is actually neutral. It's neutral until you decide what you make that mean for yourself, right? You can make it mean that your boss is not so great a person. You could make it mean, oh, this is, something I need to learn. You can make it mean, 1,000 different things. That's the first thing we work on. So when it comes to a situation, like let's say the relationship with a coworker or a boss, we just a lot of the times what happens is people kind of get tunnel vision about their thinking about a specific person. Once they've decided they don't like their boss, they look for evidence of all the things they don't like about their boss, right?
Yep.
And then just perpetuates on itself.
Sure.
Right.
And you can tell when somebody doesn't like you too. So that's not going to help your cause.
Well, you certainly can, but you can't, if your boss doesn't like you, unless they've come out and said they don't like you.
Yeah.
Sometimes we create this
True.
like BS in our own brain.
What I was suggesting is that if you don't like your boss and you're always finding fault with them, eventually they're going to pick up on that too. Yes. And that doesn't, doesn't make it any easier.
And it comes out in all different ways. Like it comes out in our behavior with them, about them, how we behave with other people, what we say to other people. Like it comes out in all different kinds of ways.
Right.
And it sucks up our energy as well. So the first thing is helping them recognize that what they believe about their boss is based on their thinking. Right. And, and people think their thoughts are facts, but really they're not facts. They're just their thoughts. Because I bet you we can find people who actually like your boss or think your boss is smart. The fact that you think they're an idiot or they're not qualified or they're a crappy leader, right? Yeah. That's your thinking, right? Your opinion, you're allowed to have it, but own it. It's not a fact. And so, it's really just about then dissecting other things, like helping them see other things about their boss first. Are there redeeming qualities? Are there other things that you could focus on that are working about your boss? Are there things about your boss that you can leverage to your benefit? So there's trying to find the things that you appreciate about your boss. There's identifying the value that your boss can play in your own development. Like your boss probably isn't bad at everything, right? They're maybe not good at the things that you wanted them to be good at. So like, what are they good at?
Yeah.
And how can you leverage those things in your growth? How can you backfill the things that you need to learn? Your boss isn't actually responsible for all your learning and development. You are.
Right.
Right. So how can you leverage your boss, make it work with your boss, and then find other ways to grow in the ways that you need to grow? How can you, sometimes another opportunity is how can you fill in the leadership gaps? How can you see this as an opportunity? If your boss isn't great at making decisions, for instance, how can you step up in that area? If your boss isn't organized, how can you step up? How can you help them, help the team, that sort of thing?
And the other thing too is that, sometimes, well, almost always, you're not the same as everybody else working for that same boss, right?
Yeah.
And so your boss is going to have to sometimes make life easier for this person at your expense, or vice versa. And so it's going to feel like it's always against you, but it isn't. It's just a matter of running a department or a team or a company well, that sometimes you don't always get what you want.
Well, and I would even challenge that too and say, your boss makes a decision that is neutral. You deciding, not you, when someone decides that it's against them, that's their own thought. Your boss didn't do it to be against you.
When
Your
I
boss
say
just made a decision, right?
Yeah. When I say against, I sort of mean
not at your
benefit.
Forgive
me, I'm a geek, but I'm thinking of the Starship Enterprise here. So
I love Star Trek.
All right. So we're going to go hunt down the Klingons. That's not doing Scotty any favors, right? The ship's going to be, the shields are going to fail. The warp core is going to breach. His life would be a lot easier if we just kept orbiting this planet, right?
Okay. Yes.
And so sometimes Kirk has to make decisions that appear to be in favor of the mandate of one officer versus the other.
Right.
But that's not because it's personal, and that's not because I don't care about keeping the ship in one piece. It's just that I can't let your life be easy in this instance.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. And so, you get to decide what you think about all of that. You get to decide what you think about going to, fight the Klingons and help. Was there a Klingon in the original Star Trek? I don't know. Like that was on the Enterprise. I'm thinking
I don't
about
think
Worf.
so, but we had to wait for Worf, right?
Yeah. I think he was next gen. I'm not saying.
That's what I mean. But next year we had to wait for him. I'm going to challenge you to come up with another Star Trek story.
Okay. I'm also Star Wars or, Marvel Universe. I'm full geek.
Oh, you're fluent.
Yes.
You're multilingual. Okay. A lot of what you're talking about sounds like emotional intelligence. Is that sort of something you draw on? Is that field of, I guess, self-help, something that you really draw on?
I think it does cross into emotional intelligence. I mean, I look at it as emotional accountability.
Oh, okay.
Because it's more for me like owning how you feel about things. Because we often blame how we feel on other people and other things. I still do it. Like I practice this all the time, and my husband will forget to take the garbage out, and I'm getting annoyed, and I'm blaming it on the fact that he something he did, when really I'm just annoyed because I expected something, and I'm setting myself up. And I think that the thing is that once people realize that they have agency over their emotions, and the more that they can get aware of which thoughts are creating which emotions, they can make choices.
Right.
Right. And it takes practice. It's not something you do overnight, but it takes way less energy to do this than it does to like all the worrying and anxiety you have about your boss, a bad boss relationship or a bad peer relationship or hating your job or trying to start over. All of those things suck up so much more energy and are so much more exhausting than the work that you would just need to do to realize, oh, okay, I need to practice getting aware of what I'm thinking is creating my emotions and choosing different things.
Right.
And I think that's just so odd to people and a bit scary to look at their emotions, that they choose the suffering sometimes versus the work that it takes, but it's very simple. And once you start to see that you have this agency and control, it gives you a sense of freedom to realize, oh, I can actually make all my relationships whatever I want them to be. I can do whatever I want to do. I can achieve any goal I want to achieve. Wow. What does that mean for me? Right.
Well, it's a kind of, you call it accountability, and I like that. I wrote that down, but I also think it's a kind of maturity because, we all want sugar. We all want chips. We all want to watch TV. Like there are things that are really easy in the moment. But if you understand what those desires are trying to do, you can think longer term. So I hate this person. I'm not going to answer the call. I'm going to drag my feet on answering the email or whatever. That might feel good right in the very moment, but in the long term, it's not going to be. So you got to use the big part of the brain to overcome what the small part of the brain is telling you to do in any given moment. Yes.
I call it survival brain and strategic brain, lizard brain, or your animal brain, or it's called the cerebellum. It's actually literally in Latin, little brain.
Yeah.
But it's the brain we share with animals that the focus is to help us survive, right? Keeps us away from danger. That was great when we lived in caves, but we don't live in caves anymore.
Right. We live in a very complicated world for sure.
Yeah. So much more emotionally challenging world than physically challenging world. And so our pain largely in this world is emotional pain. And it's funny that you called it, I can't remember what you called it, like childhood or something. Maturity, because in the actual theory that I studied, they call it emotional adulthood versus emotional childhood. Right. And I don't call it that with my clients because no one wants to be told that they're an emotional child.
You're acting like a child. Yeah, that'll really help.
But that's essentially it. Like the more we point fingers and say, your fault. So basically what we're doing, it's your fault that I feel this way. We're acting as emotional children. We haven't developed the ability to be able to take accountability for how we're showing up. And that's really what I help my clients to do, is to take accountability for how they're showing up and make choices.
So one other aspect that you hear a lot about is imposter syndrome, which is if we're worried about what other people think, this is us thinking things about ourselves.
Yes.
And it can really hold people back. It can say, you're lucky to have the job you have because you're a screw up. That's what's going on in your head. And you're never going to get a job anywhere else because you're an imposter. Do you have any advice for people who are in that trap?
So much.
Okay, lay it on me.
I mean, literally, Tim, you're opening up like all the things. I could talk about stuff for hours. Now, I will direct people. I did an IGTV 2 weeks ago, specifically on imposter syndrome, that, you can go check out. But imposter syndrome is just a form of self-doubt. Okay. So, and it usually happens, like we all have self-doubt. It's a thought. Self-doubt is an emotion created by thought. And it comes from our survival brain, which is there to help us survive. And it usually happens to people who are pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. So again, with high performers, people who are achieving things in their careers, your brain sees you pushing yourself to grow, right? I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to get on stage. I'm going to change something. I'm going to whatever you're going to do, right? In your life. And then your brain is like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And your survival brain's like, I need to get this person to stop because danger, I'm feeling a negative emotion. And so it sends you these thoughts, right? Stop. You're not good enough for this. You can't do this, right? There are forms of people who think that, who aren't trying new things. That's a different kind of self-doubt. I wouldn't call that imposter syndrome.
Right.
Just lack of self-esteem type of self-doubt. But this is more like your brain trying to get you to stop doing what you're doing because it's so it's feeding you this, you're not good enough to do this. They're going to find out one day, right? And we call it imposter syndrome, which drives me nuts too, because it sounds like it's a disease, like it's a syndrome, like we caught it, like we don't have a choice,
right?
Like it's we're at the effect of it, and really we control it with our thinking. We don't have to have it. It's a normal thing. All humans get self-doubt. Like it's just your brain doing its job,
Mhm.
to keep you from going outside of the norm, like outside of your comfort zone. So if you are someone who pushes yourself, you're going to probably get these messages. And the more that you recognize them as what they are, which is just your brain doing its job and acting normally as like it's supposed to, and you recognize it for that, you can actually quiet that noise. You don't have to believe it, right?
Well,
You can
that's so important because it is so debilitating to think, especially when it's a kind of performative thing. I mean, even, being a host on a podcast or being a guest on the podcast, if you
totally.
think you're going to be terrible, you're not going to be thinking straight. That's good. What's going to be going on in your head, and you won't
Absolutely.
perform well. It's a
That's
self-fulfilling
right.
prophecy.
100%. That's exactly what this think, feel, do model that I teach my clients is. It's like, if I think I'm not supposed to be here, that gives me feeling of self-doubt. I act out, like I forget my lines. I forget the slide I'm supposed to present. I'm a little less focused, whatever. All these actions come from that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you need to deal with that. Like, so for instance, if you're, whenever you feel self-doubt, like if you're about to go into a meeting and you're like, I remember when I was told the story on the IGTV live, it was just, I can't remember. Anyway, I was in the UK. I'm a Canadian girl, first of all. So I'm in the UK and I'm presenting the annual marketing plan to all the franchisees across Europe. Right. And to sell the plan, to tell them what's going on. And I'm thinking to myself, how is little old me from Canada, who didn't finish her degree, standing here in front of all these multi-millionaires from across Europe, no less, telling them what they need to do with their marketing plan?
Right.
Like, how did that happen? How am I qualified to do that? Right. And so it's in those moments when you're feeling those things, that's where you sort of can do a little self-coaching and say, okay, why am I thinking this? Like, what am I thinking? I'm thinking I'm not qualified. That's making me feel self-doubt. Here's how do I want to think instead? I want to remind myself that I earned this, that I'm good at this, that this is just the next step. You start to think different things. That's where you manage your mind in those moments to set yourself up for success,
Right.
as you look forward.
So I had imposter syndrome going from kindergarten to grade 1. I had a nervous breakdown thinking that I was going to have to be doing these book reports and encyclopedias, and I couldn't sleep. And the lesson I drew from that, because grade 1 turned out to be just learning the alphabet again, but faster. Like it wasn't this huge step. And what it made me realize is chances are you wouldn't be allowed to be in that position if you weren't qualified. They didn't send me to grade 4. They sent me to grade 1. And most of the time, if you get a shot, it's because you have a shot. Right.
And that's a great thought. And that's a thought that works for you.
Yeah.
Right. Because you believe it. And that's really what the key thing is finding a thought, because that thought might not work for everybody.
Right.
The key thing is, people say to me, oh, this is, thought work is just the secret. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's all woo woo. And it's not about that. It's about, okay, you can believe I'm not supposed to be here. I have no, right to be here, let's say. That can be a thought you believe, but you could also believe 100%. There's probably another thought in there that tells you, I earned this.
Right.
You probably also believe that. It's about helping clients first, teaching them to find other thoughts. I call it equal airtime. Like, give equal airtime to the positive thoughts you believe about yourself. Find those positive thoughts that you already believe. Like, you don't have to stand in the mirror every day and say them to yourself and put them on stickies everywhere, to convince yourself. It's just, I already believe that I've earned this. I do believe that, as well as sometimes believing that I don't belong here.
So I have to know how that McDonald's presentation went. How'd you do?
I freaking nailed it. Of course I did.
Well, because I was going to ask, because that would be a tough room for anybody, because you're not necessarily telling them what they want to hear.
No, I mean, marketing is never popular because we're spending their money, right?
Right. So, I mean, you have to sort of calibrate for that too. The odds of you being carried out in a sedan chair are pretty low, no matter how well you nail it. Right.
Well, yeah. And, the other thing of the different cultures, like the Brits are great in a room, in a meeting, because they're always extremely polite.
Right.
Whereas, the further east you go in Europe, I find people have a bit more, more excitable.
direct.
Let's call it.
Yeah.
It's a big stereotype, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was great. And because a lot of the people presenting were British and I'm sort of an animated person using my hands, Canadian, whatever, it was quite entertaining. So that saved me a little bit, but also I knew what the frick I was talking about.
Right. Preparation is very
Yeah.
important. That's probably the cure for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So suppose a client comes to you and one of the reasons they want to move on is they're fed up because they're not getting promoted.
Mm-hmm.
Are there steps you take to sort of ground their expectation in the reality? I mean, it's possible that they are sowing the seeds for that. It's also possible they're just in the wrong environment. What do you do under those circumstances?
Well, I have a sort of a 3-step process at last week's pod. You're feeding me great stuff because, last week's podcast or this week, I don't remember, to get promoted, I have a little 3-step process called AIM, which is assess, incrementalize, and
Monitor?
No. Oh,
Move.
Manage. No, it's manage.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. So,
You should listen to your own stuff.
I should listen to my own stuff. But anyway, so assess is really it's assessing where you're being really honest about assessing what's happening. So this is where we get into a little bit of first, how much of what's going on are circumstances? How much of what's going on is your own BS that you're creating, right? How much is there information out there that you're not listening to, or drama that you're creating, or politics that are circumstances? We really need to assess. And this is the same thing that you would do to, if anybody out there knows how to write a plan, or, you're doing an analysis of something, you have a project going, the very first thing that you do is you do a situation analysis.
Right.
So that's what this is. You need to really honestly, and that's what I help my clients assess, is honestly assess the situation, not just the reasons why it's not happening, and finger point, where are you showing up and what aren't you leveraging, all those kinds of things. Then we put within the assess, okay, so what's the goal? What's the plan based on that? And then we incrementalize. So an incrementalize for me is, one of the challenges that I've always had for myself and for my team is, in the review process, which I know has evolved in the 4 years that I've been out of corporate, but people will say, okay, Tim, you're a terrible presenter. Okay. On the scale of 1 to 10, let's say, I don't know if they're saying this about you, Tim, so fair, but
I'm blushing inside.
Your presentation skills need to improve, and now that here's what, you're not dynamic, or you're not, focused, or you don't listen to the audience, or you don't answer questions well, whatever, they're giving you this feedback. Okay. You get this in your review. And the next day, maybe you have a presentation, and now they're sitting there watching you going, well, I gave them the feedback yesterday. You better be brilliant today. Hope you figured it out
today.
Yeah. So it's really about deciding in this incrementalized thing, it's about deciding, what does success look like for you, Tim, aligning that with the stakeholders who are assessing you, but really it's more important what you want, but then making sure that you're, addressing that, and then deciding the steps you want to take to get there. Right. So so if you're a 4 out of 10 now as a presenter, and you've defined what 10 out of 10 looks like, it's that you're not going to go from 4 to 10 overnight. What does 5 out of 10 look like? Right. It's just really kind of getting clear about what that plan looks like. And then managing it is really about managing the stakeholders and the organization around you to buy into your step-by-step incrementalized approach, and getting them to notice when you're doing it right. So rather than, your boss or your boss's boss or your indirect boss or some of your peers or whoever, right, is watching you now up on that stage, they're not going to be whoever the key people are that you need to bring into your development on this and have a say, in how the feedback is then fed back to you. They need to know that 5 out of 10 looks like this. And you know what, boss, I want you to look for these things. Tell me when I'm doing this right and this right and this right. And you're getting them to focus on, and I just did this with a client too, not only your boss, but your boss's boss. Get them to help feed into, noticing when you're doing it right in the 5 out of 10 and getting everyone involved. So you're managing the organization to see you differently and look for what is working.
Right.
Right. So when the time comes for you to get promoted, it's a no-brainer. It's like, not, should we promote them? It's like, yeah, of course we have to promote them when they're sitting around, the talent management roundtable.
Right. Because we discussed what it would take and I did it.
Right.
So yeah, hopefully in a healthy environment that would work.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is too, like, I know there are unhealthy environments out there and people use as an excuse sometimes not to do it, but you got to create the space for yourself. Mm-hmm. Like, if you go to your boss and say, look, I'm going to do this. This is what I need from you. Even if you don't get it 100%, you only get it 70%. You're getting it 70% more than you did before, and you need to create that space.
So this is interesting. What do you, some people can't be promoted within the organization they're in. They're like, maybe you work for an engineering firm and you're the best marketer in the world, but you're marketing for an engineering firm. You're unlikely to get promoted to being president of the engineering firm. I mean, there are exceptions that could happen, but generally the culture might be, we need an engineer there, or a law firm or whatever, where it's specialty and you're a cost center. You obviously contribute, but you're not part of the central core. Is there a way to deal with that? Or is that just really something you have to embrace reality? And if you want to grow, it's somewhere else?
I think it really just depends on the person and what their goal is, like, and what's the most important thing to them. Is it being president of a company, if that's your goal? And then I would say, okay, so you're at the engineering firm right now and you're marketing. Which boxes is that role in that engineering firm ticking? Like, this is where people sort of, they drift from one job to another until they get to where they are. But if you are really clear on what you want, and you know what you need to get there, I'm not saying like between now and the next 10 years from now, but I always like to look at it in 90-day increments and try to plan a year at a time, right? With the long-term goal, but you sort of, even if the goal is say, oh, I want to be president in 5 years, what does that mean in the next 12 months? And then what am I doing in the next 90 days, right? But if you kind of know largely, you have some milestones of things that you need to achieve, then to me, it takes the emotion out of, do I stay at this engineering firm or not? It's more about, okay, so while I'm here, here's what I'm capitalizing on. It gives me opportunities in the industry. I'm going to build my brand. I'm going to whatever, like, what can you really suck out of this job?
Right.
And how are you planting seeds for the next opportunity?
And there are options, right? You don't necessarily have to chuck being a really good marketer for an engineering firm. Maybe there's a bigger engineering firm.
Sure.
Right.
Right. But you assess those opportunities. Like, if you really want to be president of an engineering firm and work your way through marketing, and that
go to engineering school,
has to be the way you want to get there. Totally great. You got to build a plan for that, though.
Yeah.
It's not just going to happen by osmosis.
So if you've said several times the phrase knowing what you want, that you really have to know what you want. And I can imagine in my mind's eye that your clients are sometimes at either end of this spectrum. I have no idea what I want. I need you to help me figure that out. Or I know what I want, and you're thinking, you're never going to get that, buddy, unless we really make a long plan. That what you're asking for is not possible from where you are. So we got to identify some intermediate steps. So I want to look at that end, and we've talked about that end a little bit, but I want to talk, because I know you're probably going to say it's got something to do with assess, incrementalize, and manage.
A little bit, but I also have something else I want to say about that.
Okay, let's start with that, because I can see you want that.
Well, no, I just want to sort of level set and say, when someone comes to me, regardless of where they are, and they say, I want this, they know what they want. My job as a coach is to believe in them 100% and help them get there, help them figure out how to get there. I never believe that it's impossible. Like I'm not like, if someone is like entry level and they want to be president in 6 months, okay. I mean, I haven't met anyone like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might question why.
That's a Michael J. Fox movie.
Yes, exactly. I might just, my job as a coach too is to break it down and assess. And once we kind of break down all the things that they need to do, and then they look at the timeline and their bandwidth, like it's not for me to tell them that they can't do it. My job is to help them build a plan to do it. And then they get to decide, is it realistic or not?
Yeah.
And how can
that.
And so I just want to make sure that, I my job, especially as a coach, all the coaches out there, like we don't judge. We're getting paid to not judge more than anything else. I'm not saying that. I give people hard truths as well, but more about how they're showing up and why they're getting in their own way. Mm-hmm. But my job is to believe in them until they can believe in themselves.
That's awesome. I love that. So at the other end, I just don't, I'm not crazy about my current job, but I don't know what to do next.
Right.
How do I search my way through that?
Well, at the end of the day, people want, I always say to people like, well, first of all, like we can go through all the different things. We can go through like, what do you value? What do you like to do? What do you love? Like, what makes you happy when you're doing it? We can do an assessment like that. We can define all those things, right? Quite often what's happening when people come to me saying, I want to do something else, but I don't know what I want to do. It's because they're disillusioned about what they're doing now. Mm-hmm. Right? That's one of the issues. So first I just kind of assess, what is it about what they're doing now that's not working for them? Right. And if they say, look, I don't care. I just don't want, I want to chuck this, or I want to go work from anywhere, pre-pandemic when people had to be at the office all the time. Right. Yeah. And they want to change their lifestyle for whatever reason, then it's about, okay, let's find some things. And there's always things we can find once we do an assessment of what their values are, what their strengths are, what their belief system is, how they want to live their life, helping them just like you would, again, a project. Assess the facts that we have in front of us. I like doing these things. I value these things. This is the kind of life I want. This is how much money I want to make, whatever. Kind of narrow it down. The challenge becomes in the decision making, right? When people come and I have a client like this right now. She's just made a decision, which is amazing. But her biggest challenge was, fear of making the wrong decision.
Right. Okay. I mean, that seems like an obvious one, right? Because you could be jumping out of the frying pan into the fire.
You could be, but guess what? You get to control how much heat is in the frying pan and the fire. Like you get to control all of that. We think that we have no choice. Like we jump into these things and we think, oh, I have to hate this because my boss said this, or there was no onboarding, or I'm sitting in a common room versus my own office, or whatever it is, right? And when that happened, I don't even know what's going to happen in the future now. But anyway, like you get to choose all those things. But what I always say to people is, look, you get any decision you make can be the right one if you like your reasons for making it. That's the first thing. So rather than doing the pros and cons about decisions, I always suggest that we talk about what are the reasons you would make this decision? So if we take like why I left McDonald's, for instance, what were the reasons I was making that decision? I was unhappy. I couldn't find a way forward. I hated my boss. I couldn't take it anymore. Like all this kind of stuff, right? The reasons I was making that decision was to avoid dealing with how I was showing up and finding ways around some of the obstacles that were there. Right. So those are my reasons. I get to decide whether I'm okay with those reasons or not. Right. And then you kind of go through and what are the reasons that you would work from anywhere and make less money and all this, whatever it is. I'm not saying you would make less money working from anywhere, but let's just say that was one of the things you decided. Sure. What are those reasons? What are the reasons you would take this job versus that job, or this career path versus that career path? the thing is, there's no guarantee. You're never going to be certain, because unless you are an Avenger and can predict the future, whatever.
Well
Unless
done.
you're
You
Doctor
worked it in.
Strange, bringing it back in, right? You're not going to know which decision leads to what. So you have to make a choice.
Right.
And after you make the choice based on the reasons, if you like your reasons, then I suggest you spend 100% of your effort making that the right decision for you, versus spending any time worrying about whether it was the wrong decision.
So this is terrific advice. And I see it in other sort of not necessarily about career advice, but just even just running a company.
Totally.
If you don't make decisions, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to accept that some decisions are going to be wrong, but you can, mitigate the cost of failure. You can make sure that you're being incremental, so you're not going so far you jeopardize everything. And also, if you can make one decision, you can make another.
Right. I mean, look at my situation. Okay. I decided to leave McDonald's for reasons. Had I done it, I probably wouldn't have left. Like if I had actually known what I know today, I probably wouldn't have left. I could have fixed my situation. And then I took all of that, emotional childhood and emotional inaccountability. I don't know what the right word is. Sorry. And then I took that to starting a business, which is like the most, if you lack self-confidence, starting a business is not where to go next.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So, but that's what I did. And I started the coaching thing, and I started my development, and I learned a lot and all this kind of stuff. Along the way, I was like, what the heck did I do? I left this multi-six-figure job. What was I thinking? This was the total wrong decision, all of that stuff. That I spent time on that. And then at some point I decided, you know what? I can make a decision. I can make a decision to go back into marketing. I can make a decision to stay on this path. What is it that I want to do? Whatever it is, I'm committing to it 100%. And I'm going to like my reasons for it. I'm going to spend all my time working on making this the right decision for me. Right. And I think I could have gone either way. And at the time, this was pre-COVID too. And I was like, no, I want to work from anywhere. I want to help people. I want this to be the next phase. I want to be in control of how much money I make. These were the reasons I was deciding to do this.
Yeah.
And there are days where I still have doubt. Was this the right decision? And that's when I kind of go, oh, wait, am I going to spend energy on that? Or am I going to spend energy on making my business great today?
Yeah. And there's a distinction, isn't there, between the mission, this is what I like about the way you say it. You have to love your why or something along those lines.
Yeah.
You can still adjust how you go about it. The how can change as long as you're still pursuing that same why.
Yes. I think saying like the how is none of my business. Right. I have another way of saying it that I don't know if your podcasts are explicit or not, but I'll save you from that. I'm going to
check the box for this one. You go ahead.
No, I always just say like the how is none of my fucking business. Right. I am not above any how. I'm just
in terms of making sure that your why succeeds.
Exactly.
Right.
And I might think it's going to be this way. It turns out to be that way. Who cares? Like I'm going through with it. I'm just going to make it work as it goes forward.
So this brings to mind, there's this debate. And I think some of the debate is just how we define things or how we order things. But you hear some people say you should follow your passions, right? You'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do. And there's other people saying that's the worst advice. If all you do is follow your passions, you're never going to succeed in life because all you're thinking about is yourself. You're not producing value for anyone. You're not willing to work on the hard parts. Where do you lie on that? How do you untangle that?
I'm really passionate about this topic. Passion is an emotion, right? Here's the problem with loving something and passionate. And I have a free course that I'm like, love your job again. And I teach people about love, what it means to love. I answer that question, what is love? You know what love is? Love is an emotion. And where do feelings and emotions come from? Your thinking, right? A lot of people think love and passion are this magic thing that sort of happens and that it clicks. And when you're in the right environment with the right people and the right boss and all the things are there, that's when love happens, right? No, we create love, right? You love somebody or something or your job or whatever because of how you think about it. Right? When you first meet someone in a relationship, you have all these thoughts about them. You think that it's them making you feel love, but it's not. It's how you think about them that's making you feel love. You just don't notice it. Can you hear my dog snoring? It's hilarious.
Oh no, I can't, but I hope it stays in. I love dogs snoring.
Yeah. So, I always want to say to people, love isn't magic. Passion isn't magic. Right? You get to be passionate about whatever it is you want to be passionate about. It can be surfing, but it can also be, helping people grow in an organization and being a great leader. You can be passionate about all the things.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because the way you framed it, if passion is a spell you cast on yourself, if you feel it slipping away, that's also your doing.
100%.
Yeah.
If you don't love your job, it's because you decided not to love it anymore.
Right.
You may not know, you might have consciously decided not to love it anymore. If you don't love your husband anymore, like I always say this to people, like, look, if anybody who's in some kind of committed relationship and your spouse, there are things about your spouse that you love, and there are things about your spouse that drive you like nuts. You don't want them, right? Those things. If you decide to focus on the things and you get really tunnel vision about the things that you don't love about your spouse, guess where that relationship is going?
Sure.
Right.
And that'll show too.
Yeah. Right. And you need to make a conscious decision to decide to focus on the things that you love about that person. And if at some point you guys are going in different directions and this isn't working and you still love this person, but you don't want to be with that person, that's okay. You're making that decision. You don't have to be with them forever. Same with a job.
Yeah. But you don't have to decide with the lizard brain.
That's right. It's not because, if you're just laser focused on what you don't love, that's a whole different thing. Right. That's not you sort of really being conscious and aware of what's going on with you.
Do you work with clients who have golden handcuffs? Like they just, for whatever reason, whether it's seniority or whatever, they've got a, kind of the position you were talking about.
Yeah, no, for sure. McDonald's had great like long-term incentives.
Yeah. And how do you, what process do you work with on people who realize they probably can't get that kind of money somewhere else, or it's going to be a challenge, or it'll be exactly the same type of job? How do you, where do you work with people on that question with?
It comes back to what they want. Yeah. Again, like what are their priorities? Is it money? If it's money,
you've got money.
You got the money. Okay. Yeah. So let's work on making sure that you're happy with the rest of this stuff.
Right.
Let's fix your mindset about the rest of this stuff.
Right.
Because, you can only tolerate something for so long. Toleration always turns to resentment. And, you can't, I always say it's like, you can only pretend not to feel something for so long. I used to always get this feedback that everything I think would be on my face, right? Or whatever, or they could see it in the way my face might be fine, but I'm like moving my thumbs or my fingers on the boardroom table, and they can tell that I don't like something, right? I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I would get this feedback saying, you need to have more of a neutral look. And so what I would do was I'd still be seething in my head. Like I'd be having all the thoughts, like someone would say something like, no, that's wrong. And you can't do that. And where's that coming from? But I would try my best to hold in like all those emotions and not make a move. Right.
Back pain.
Yeah. I'm just saying like, you can do that like for small bursts, but eventually it comes out.
Yeah.
The only way to control how you act is to change how you think. Right. Like that's the only long-term solution. Like I can look at this person making the presentation and say, that's a stupid idea. Or I can look at it and go, well, I don't agree with that, but let me think about it. Or let me ask them about that later. I want to know more. I can think all the things. Like I can think about, maybe they don't know what they don't know what I'm thinking. I'm going to share my idea after this. Whatever it takes for me to just keep calm. the emotion I'm going for in this particular case, when I'm trying not to wear my emotions on my sleeve, is calm. That's the emotion I want to wear on my sleeve.
Sure.
Right? Calm or curious or interested or whatever. If I want to be calm or curious or interested, how do I need to think in a meeting? That is a way more sustainable way of behaving and managing oneself than trying to hold it in, tolerate, cope, that kind of stuff never works long-term.
So I don't want you to give away all of your secrets, but
I give away everything.
When you talk about AIM, which is this idea of assess, incrementalize, manage, I would imagine that sometimes, depending on the type of change that somebody wants to make, getting extra credentials is a way to go. So online courses or a university degree, how often does that come up, and how do you work with people to do a cost-benefit analysis on that?
I've never done a cost benefit analysis.
Well, I mean, sort of a gut cost benefit in terms of, could you spend an extra 2 hours at work every day, or should you get an MBA? Like that kind of, which is more important?
As a coach, like I just really focus on helping people stay focused on what they're trying to do, what their goals are, what are the obstacles in the way of that goal, and what are the strategies to get there. Right? If the MBA is a strategy, and they need to do that, then that's their decision. Like I don't tell them what to do. It's like anything else. For me, it's what are the reasons you like to get an MBA, and what are the reasons you would work 2 extra hours, and this one is more, I'm not going to do the MBA because it's going to cost too much money.
Right.
Okay. Do you like that reason for making the decision? Yes, it'll get me there faster. I want to do it. It's going to cost too much money, whatever. What are all the reasons? And then you make a decision. And my job is to really, whenever my client makes a decision, it's stay committed to that decision. How am I helping you keep your mind focused on making that the best decision for you?
Okay, so I imagine the same analysis would apply to things like doing a side hustle or gig work on the side, because people could do that for a couple of reasons. One is they just need the extra money, but often it's because they want to develop new skills. And I suspect you would suggest that people be mindful about why they're doing it.
Absolutely.
And because it could contribute to a change either in their fortunes at work or in terms of getting a different job. Do you see people clearing their way forward doing that sometimes?
Absolutely. I mean, anything I think the big thing for coaches is that's different than mentors. And I kind of oscillate a little bit depending on what it is, because I do have a lot of experience in a corporate environment, but I'll always say to my client, like, okay, do you want me to switch to a consultant role for a second? I can give this, but as coaches, it's not my job to tell you what to do.
Okay.
My job is to help you see how you're showing up, show you how your brain is working in getting in your way, right? Keeping you focused on what you want to do, asking you the hard questions to make sure you're thinking things through, right? Giving you the tough, honest truth sometimes.
Yeah.
And then supporting you, like always being on your side, always believing in you, not judging you. Like, how often do you get to be in a situation where the person is talking to you and is 100% behind you? You can trust them. It's safe. They don't judge you. And
they don't have a direct stake in what you decide.
No,
they
no
just
agenda.
want you to succeed. Yeah.
That's it.
That's beautiful. So,
sorry, because I'll just say the minute I say to you, you should go for your MBA versus working late, then I'm putting my own opinion into your life. And my opinion in your life doesn't work.
Right. And I didn't suspect you would necessarily tell, but I imagine it's part of, I mean, at some point you got to lay the cards on the table. And one of the cards to choose from is maybe I should do something as a gig work to build that skill that I lack in the next job, or maybe I should get a university degree for that skill that I lack. I'm just sort of trying to pick out what the strategy, how you help people form their strategy.
Well, I just help them think it through. A lot of the problem is people just don't have a plan. So the first thing is I'm like, okay, so this is once we decide on the goal and the why they want that goal and their compelling reasons and all of that stuff, then it's about what are the obstacles. So What are all the things that are in your way? I don't have my master's. I need this particular skill. I have, these relationships to build, this visibility to gain, whatever all the obstacles. I don't have enough self-confidence. There's some of their mindset obstacles, right? What are they all? And then we just tackle one at a time. Okay, what are the strategies to solving this?
Mm-hmm.
And then we prioritize them.
So it just occurred to me, you tell me if you like this or not.
Yeah.
You're not a GPS, you're a map. And the difference being the map is just, there's all the roads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm showing you what roads are available. You choose, as opposed to GPS saying, turn right now.
Yeah, I definitely not a turn right now person.
Right.
I help you build the map.
Right.
Right. Like, again, I'm not going to say, okay, well, in order to have this skill, you could go get an MBA or get this kind of a job or whatever. I help you. I may sometimes throw in I've heard that people do this, what do you think about that? But because I don't want to leave them completely in a lurch,
Sure.
But my job is to really help you think it through.
Yeah.
Because that's really the problem, is people just don't think through.
Well, and also if you help them build that skill, then they can continue to write their own map.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Like people will spend like a month, 2 months planning a 1 week vacation.
Mm-hmm.
All the things they're going to do.
2 months. That's all.
Right. Depending on what it is. Oh, I'm going to go to Europe for 2 weeks. And they spend hours and hours
Years.
and hours planning the itinerary, or they pay someone, right, to do it for them. But when it comes to their career, when it's, something you spend a third of your adult life at and enables so much of your life and impacts so much of your self-esteem and your purpose in life, they spend almost no time really thinking through and planning ahead on that.
Right.
So, I always say it's the best investment you could make is to spend time writing your plan, getting a coach, getting out of your own way like this. When your career isn't working for you, for whatever reason, it doesn't just impact your, the time that you're at work. It impacts everything.
Sure.
Right. So, and it impacts people who count on you, who are part of your life. I can't think of anything else more important. Like, I know family is important.
Yeah, but
love
family
is
need you to be happy, and they need to look up to what you're doing, to be proud of what you're doing.
Yeah. And they need you to make the money. Like, there's all the things, right?
And be home occasionally. Yeah.
Right. So, it's important stuff to enable your life.
So this has been tremendously valuable. I only have a couple of questions left.
Yeah,
thank you so much. This is fantastic. I know that you're not really walking people. You're not the GPS. You're not walking people through the machinations of finding the next job. You're sort of showing them what the landscape is and helping them figure out how to navigate it. But I have to think COVID's changed everything. And so what are your observations in terms of how COVID is impacting your clients, their journey, what their options are? Do you see any changes, or is it really just still the same?
Well, I think there's just new circumstances that pop up that create more drama for people, right? So it depends on the person. Like, I have seen people who have thrived in this because they're in more control of their situation. They don't let COVID be a problem. They don't have to be in meetings all the time anymore. Like, they're in more control of their lives. Yeah. And that's been great. Like, especially people who don't have to commute like an hour and a half each way. Like, the impact to their life, the quality of life has been huge in that respect. There are other people who, have a really hard time focusing. They have kids at home, they're homeschooling.
Yeah.
They have a full-time job. Depending on their environment, they're not getting maybe some of the, I guess, just emotional support that they need from their boss or from their environment. And so it's, they're struggling. That's why I think coaching is so important, or managing your mental health through this so important. Even one of my clients said the other day, people are having a really hard time with this. I'm like, not everyone, is the level of drama that people create around it and the stress that comes with it is dependent on the person. Like, there's some people who think, I can't, I have to homeschool my kids because they're home, that's out of my control.
Yeah.
And I have to act like I'm still the perfect employee and nothing's going to drop and all the things. Maybe you don't.
Right.
What space are you creating for yourself? Like that's where people start to become, I don't like to use the word victim, but they become at the effect of everything that's happening to them versus creating the space for themselves and being at the cause of their life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question is, let's get a little bit specific about what you offer. So what do you offer courses, or I know you offer coaching. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your ideal clients look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I have two things that I really focus on right now. Number one is one-on-one clients. So if you want to talk to me about working with me one-on-one, I offer free sessions. So if you go to thecareerreset.com/chat, then there's a 4-question questionnaire, like an intake form, and then you get access to my calendar. We book a free 45-minute session. The other way that I work with people are corporations. I have a partner, and we do high performing team programs specifically. And if you haven't caught it yet, for me, high performing teams are all about the individual. How can we make the individuals more confident, show up in a more trustworthy way, manage their own individual growth, in support of the team, and we do a lot of that work. And that's more of a protracted program, rather than coming in for a 2-day offsite, which I find people take 20% of the content away and they don't actually get a chance to practice it. We sort of protract that same amount of time over 4 to 6 months so that we're training people on little pieces, and they're again, incrementalizing
right.
how they're using that information. And so for me, in both cases, it's, whether it's the individual person, I love working with people who are smart, ambitious, driven, but you know what? They just are not in love with what they're doing anymore. They're not sure about what they want, how they can, what they should do next. If they're open to figuring out how to love their job again and also want to be great at it, I look at it more like a mindset stroke performance coaching, then that's the person I want to work with. Someone who wants more for themselves in their career, believes that they can get it, are willing to do the work on themselves, and are open to not having to start over to do it. Right.
That's a very valuable service. Thank you so much for coming on
Absolutely.
the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
My guest today was Mel Savage. Mel's LinkedIn profile and information on where to learn more about resetting your career will be in the show notes. My name is Tim Hampton, and you can reach me at tim@unusuallywellinformed.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll subscribe and join me for the next show with another unusually well-informed leader in business and technology.
Thank you for listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. The opinions expressed by the host and guests on the Unusually Well-Informed podcast are their own and do not reflect that of their employer or any other affiliation.